Hello, my name is Replico, and I am Slav. I am the person of the Slavic origin, so today I'm going to look at a very interesting video. We are both, you and I, and maybe someone else, going to watch the video from the channel called Weird History. And so this particular video is called What Was Life in the Soviet Union Like? It is probably more about the overall quality of life in the USSR, but the main problem is that the whole history of the USSR and especially the quality of life of the people was quite a very complicated question. Well, there are several reasons for that. As for my schooling system, I was studying the history of the USSR in both forms number 10 and 11. Both of these forms are dedicated to the history of the USSR because in Ukraine, in the old schooling system, we had two different school subjects. Those were foreign history, the history of Asian countries, of the USA, of Russia, just from the 6th to 11th form. And in form number 10 and 11, the whole class of Ukrainian history consisted of the history of the USSR. And so it is going to be quite interesting. Let's just begin watching.
The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, was a communist state from 1922 to 1991 and was a big rival of the US from World War II to the end of the 80s. But what was the Soviet Union really like? And what was it like living there? Well, it turns out it's complicated.
Well, it really is complicated, especially if you look at the whole fact that you should better divide the whole history of the USSR into different periods, like the period of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and the list goes on.
So, today we're going to take a look at things you didn't know about daily life in the Soviet Union. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. After that, we'd be much obliged if you would leave a comment and let us know what other geopolitical topics you would like to hear about. Okay, you don't know how lucky you are that we're going to tell you how things worked back in the USSR.
Oh, so this is going to be about styliagis. Soviet hipsters made bootleg records. Well, those people weren't quite like hipsters. I would say that styliagis were more like a subculture. But, well, it is quite interesting. So let's just hear what they have to say.
From the late 40s to the early 60s, the Soviet Union had a counterculture group that aped Western beatnik and hipster culture and even made bootleg LPs. This being the USSR, the so-called styliagi, or style hunters, were forced to make the bootlegs out of recycled X-ray films. This meant the records had ghostly bones all over them, which, to be honest, sounds pretty badass. The styliagi were, in the words of one style blogger,
Yeah, they were looking quite weird and they were not as, let's just say, good looking in the whole community of the Soviet people, because just imagine the whole group of Soviet people consisting of the Slavic people, and so right here out of nowhere come the people of this look. This would be quite weird. So, a group of dandy youngsters dressed up in colorful American-inspired get-ups that were unafraid to make a bold fashion statement. Yeah, it was quite bold, to be honest, and especially in the times where, well, there was quite a lot of different censorship.
a group of dandy youngsters dressed up in colorful American-inspired get-ups that were unafraid to make a bold fashion statement. Those critical of the styliagi claimed, today he dances jazz, but tomorrow he will
Sell his homeland. Yeah, it is a very interesting example of the logical failure, and this particular logical failure or logical mistake is called a slippery road, if I'm not mistaken. I only know this in Russian because I even know the Russian statement, which sounds like «Сегодня он танцует джаз», не-не, «Сегодня ты танцуешь джаз, а завтра родину продашь». And so it sounds more like «Today you dance jazz, and tomorrow you sell your homeland». But this translation is also fine.
sell his homeland. Talk about your slippery slopes.
Yeah, the slippery slope. Yeah, this is what it's called. Pepsi came before Coke or McDonald's. Yeah, it is true. And in fact, Pepsi was really beloved in, let's just say, it was really loud between the people from the government and military.
McDonald's and Coca-Cola are often cited as being the two American companies with the most worldwide influence and reach. But it was actually Pepsi-Cola that made it into the USSR.
Oh, it's actually Ukrainian because you see on the left it says пряный журавлиный напій безалкогольний. It is Ukrainian, so it's cranberry Schweppes, and it says that this particular one is non-alcoholic. And also Pepsi here says на натуральних ароматизаторах. Yeah. Okay, okay. And Pepsi Cola with the old design.
First. Yeah. Pepsi was available in the Soviet Union a full 21 years before McDonald's and 16 years before Coca-Cola. It had a lot to do with Pepsi's appearance at an exhibit at Moscow's Sokolniki Park in 1959.
Sokolniki. It's not Sokolniki, it's Sokolniki, if I'm not mistaken.
Where the soda was given out for free in disposable paper cups. The Soviets struck a deal with Pepsi a decade later that also included the distribution rights for Stoli vodka. Despite
Столичная.
the head start, however, Coke would catch up, and as of 2020, Coca-Cola was the most popular non-alcoholic beverage in Russia. Pepsi was second. But speaking of beverages...
So, that's the whole thing that you have to say? This is it? Really? There were much more different elements of this that were interesting, like the fact that the Soviet Union had a deal with Pepsi and in fact gave Pepsi some of the military equipment, and so Pepsi became one of the, let's just say, military giants among some of the different countries. It's a funny thing, and it really, well, let's just say, happened. But the Coca-Cola and McDonald's, they happened in like the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, and it all happened just because of the glasnost and because of the Gorbachev. Yeah. So beer wasn't considered alcohol. This sounds quite interesting because I did not actually know about the whole story behind the beer in the USSR, but well, let's hear.
Famous beer lovers like Homer Simpson and Norm Peterson might have loved Russia, because, while this sounds wild, it wouldn't be until 2011 that beer came to be defined as an alcoholic beverage.
This sounds quite stupid, to be honest, especially when the year is 2011, because the Soviet Union broke in 1991, and so probably by 2011 they mean Russia. Well, the thing is that even before 2011, it was still considered an alcoholic beverage, so it sounds more like a fake information to me.
In the former Soviet nation. Prior to that, legislation classified it as a foodstuff, meaning it could be sold like a soft drink. This meant it could be sold in street kiosks and could be imbibed openly in just about any public place in the
Well, it could be, but it doesn't mean that it could be sold to children.
country. Now, to be clear, this wasn't because the Russians didn't know beer was alcoholic or anything like that. It was really a legal consequence of an international trade pact known as the Nice Agreement. The agreement classified hard liquor and beer as two different types of goods, something Russian liquor producers spent years trying to change without success. In any case, alcohol in general was wildly popular during the Soviet era. In fact, when Mikhail Gorbachev, the country's head of state from 1990 through 1991, tried to pass a dry law that raised the price of booze and...
Okay. Really? Just only 990 and 991? Okay, this sounds quite weird to me.
restricted when and what quantities it could be sold, it affected his popularity. Some historians think it even
Well, it really, let's just say, hit his popularity because of the fact of the prohibition. And, well, let's just say, Russian people who absolutely love drinking wouldn't really like the whole idea of the prohibition, especially the alcoholic prohibition.
hastened his downfall. Studies have shown that Gorbachev's program correlated with a rise in life expectancy and a drop in criminal behavior. On the other hand, it cost the country about 100 billion rubles in tax revenues and became a massive source of income to organized criminals and black marketeers. So it was a mixed bag, or a mixed drink in this case.
Well, quite the same as it was in America during the 30s. So cars were meant to last a lifetime. Yeah, it really was so. It is more of the element of the, let's just say, the people of the USSR who were not as interested in the fact that something looks stylish or that something is, let's just say, interesting. It was more about the whole fact that something is practical.
In an era when everything is made to be constantly replaced and upgraded, it's hard to remember that there was once a time when things were built to last, like, for example, Soviet cars. According to Russian author Alexander Kabakov, from the 1930s to the 1950s especially, car owners in the Soviet Union took great pride in making their vehicles last as long as possible, and in some cases, they lasted a lifetime. It wasn't just careful owners that gave these vehicles their longevity. Quality control on the manufacturing end was a huge part of it, and so was build quality. In fact, Kabakov says the metal frames were so thick coming off the line, they were basically resistant to corrosion.
Well, not that resistant to corrosion, because we know that most of the cars that existed during those times are now quite, let's just say, well, they have been exposed to corrosion. Buying groceries took forever. Yeah, it really did. But the thing is that in this particular question, we have to divide the whole history of the USSR, because it wasn't so during the 30s and 40s, because, well, you can imagine. And so during the 50s, it probably wasn't like that, but during the 70s and 80s, yeah, and especially the 90s, it really was so, because of just the whole fact of the very weird system of goods distribution in the USSR. Well, what can I say here? The whole system was really weird because people had a very different idea of how and why they should buy some of the different things that are actually available in the store. So you did not buy something because you wanted something. You did buy something because it was actually available and because it could be so that you might need it later, so to speak.
Everyone's heard of long Soviet bread lines, but that's not even the half of it. Even a self-proclaimed well-off American student living in Moscow in the mid-60s said that getting any food at all was a tremendous chore. According to Dr. Naomi F. Collins, she was constantly in a state of exhaustion just from the efforts of daily living.
Yeah, because you had to stand in a queue or in line for a very, very, very long time.
Even buying staples like cheese and rice took forever.
But I'm very interested in just the whole idea if they are going to talk about спецраспределители. So let's just hear the thing that they have to say.
Because you had to stand in long lines for nearly every item you wanted. And even after waiting, you didn't get the item directly. You
Yeah,
had to get vouchers at each station and pay a cashier before going back to the stations and picking up your items.
but it wasn't like always about the vouchers, because the voucher system was, well, they were represented only in the late, in the second half of the history of the USSR, let's just say so. And so this is it. They did not even say anything about спецраспределители. Really? They didn't? Wow! I'm just amazed, because they skipped the most interesting parts about everything, like the Pepsi, like about the fact that Pepsi wasn't even drank in such clear way, because people didn't really want to look like they were drinking Pepsi, so it was actually transparent. Yeah, it really was, so that it looks like you are drinking vodka or something like that. And so let's just talk about the thing that I had to say about спецраспределители. So the спецраспределитель was a very different system from the one that the general people used. This one that I'm talking about was actually used by the elite and by the people of the government, because they just had everything available at any moment. At any moment. They did not have to wait in a line, they did not have to stand for a whole day, and so it was like that. So the elite system was actually elite, and there was nothing like equality. It did not exist in the USSR. Stalin wanted everyone to eat in the communal cafeterias. Yeah, it really was so. It was something more like the fact of that time, because at that time there was such thing as industrialization, and so because of the industrialization a lot of people have to eat right in the place where they work. So this leads to the fact that there has to be something like a cafeteria, but the communal one, the communal I mean. And so there was a thing like mensa or столовая.
Soviet authorities in Stalin's time considered private kitchens, dining rooms, and even apartments to be dangerous to the regime. So an idea was tossed around in the early days to force people to eat in communal cafeterias. It sounds like a storyline from a Dr. Strangelove type political farce.
No, it doesn't, because it really was so. The whole thing about the privatization and the fact that Stalin was talking about all of that is actually true, but it doesn't mean that the elites were not having a giant banquets and festivals.
But so-called kitchen politics were actually considered such a threat that Soviet leaders wanted houses built without kitchens at all. It wasn't just about preventing people from having privacy. The idea was also meant to relieve a housewife from her daily chores,
Yeah, because now woman has to be strong.
so that she could develop as a personality and free the country from the Tsarism and bring happiness.
Tsarism, I would better say. Yeah, it's more said like Tsar in English, but in Russian and in Ukrainian it's Tsar or Tsar.
To poorer classes. Because I guess we all know cooking only brings sorrow? Not surprisingly, the idea did not pan out. And soon, widespread industrialization led to over 100
Yeah, so they actually said about the reason. Yeah, the reason was industrialization.
different ethnic groups all being served the same exact meals, such as canned soup, meat, and fish.
So there weren't soup kitchens for the poor. I don't actually understand what they want to say by that, but let's just hear.
A New York Times feature from 1989 reveals quite a bit about the Soviet attitude regarding the poor and the homeless in the last few years of the USSR. One Western diplomat is quoted as saying that Soviet officials stopped gathering statistics on poverty because they insisted it simply did not exist. When presented with the idea of combating the issue with American-style soup kitchens, one Soviet official even said, "We are opposed to this system, where poor people get free dinner. Psychologically, it's a strange idea to us. We will not consider such a variant."
And there is a very simple reason for that, because the whole kitchen politics also actually, let's just say, included the whole fact and idea that if you don't work, then you do not eat. Yep, so it was so, because you just couldn't eat if you did not work.
They probably should have considered such a variant, however, since the state of the Soviet economy made earning one's dinner incredibly difficult. In fact, in 1989, it took a Soviet worker 10 times longer to earn a pound of meat than it did the average American. But not everyone was having a hard time getting the foods they wanted.
Oh, the ruling elite ate and drank like kings. Oh, so that's the part that I was talking about. Yeah, talk about communism in the USSR when, well, this shit was happening.
In 1984, the year, not the George Orwell novel, Konstantin Mtsimis reported that despite there being a nationwide food shortage, the ruling elite in Moscow ate like kings, using the so-called Kremlyovska stolovaya.
Кремлевская столовая. It's not Кремлевская столовая. No, it's Кремлевская столовая.
Or Kremlin Canteen.
Yeah.
The canteen was a network of special stores that sold food of particularly high quality to those with special passes. Sausages, fish delicacies, cheeses, bread, vodka, cakes, as well as fruits and vegetables.
While the general people did not have anything like that. Well, a great communistic regime. I absolutely love it. So, It also was like that in the army. Well, this is more like a personal story because it's just something that my granddad told me. So he told me about the fact that the canteen for the general people of the army, let's just say, was simple. It did not have something that was like for the people of a high class, but the other part of the canteen was the officer canteen, and so the officer canteen actually had quite a lot of different stuff. So the officer canteen actually had a lot of different ingredients that the general canteen did not have, and they even had french fries. Yeah, and I also had pepper and salt right on the tables. Yeah, this was the thing that actually made people, well, different.
Produced and grown on state farms that supply the canteen system exclusively. There were also American cigarettes, Scotch whiskey, English gin, and pharmacies that sold prescriptions you couldn't find anywhere else in the country.
Yeah, yeah. Being gay was punishable by prison or hard labor. It depends. It depends on the period again because the history of the USSR is not that simple. So, if we talk about the whole Bolshevik period of the period between 1917 and 1922 and the period of Leninism and the rule of Lenin, there was a very interesting stuff about his ideas. Lenin had nothing against gay people. Yeah, there were even gay clubs. That's a very interesting thing, and also there was a sexual revolution right in the period of the creation of the USSR and in the period of Bolsheviks, if I'm not mistaken. It probably only was active during the beginning of the USSR. So, yeah, it really was a thing. And during the time when Lenin was the general secretary, it did not appear to be something bad for the people. But right at the time when Stalin became the general secretary, well, it became punishable to be gay. So it was just like that.
Joseph Stalin really did not like the gay community.
Yeah, he really didn't. The Georgian man was absolutely traditional.
Soviet era documents declassified in 1993 show he personally insisted on the passage of an anti homosexual law. He got his wish in 1933 when Article 121, which expressly prohibited male homosexuality, was added to the criminal code. Once in effect, such activity was punishable by up to 5 years of hard labor in prison. Stalin wanted the law due to a report from the Soviet secret police that warned of pederast activists holding orgies in
Pederast actually means gay, but more like another word that begins with F and well ends with T and has a double G. So yeah, pederast is this word. Another interesting part of that was that well, lesbianism and lesbian stuff was not considered something criminal. And you know why? Because well, it didn't appear to be real for the people. People actually only thought that, well, the gay stuff is bad, homosexualism is bad, but lesbianism, no, it doesn't exist. So it was really just like that. People did not actually think that this was a real thing. So the second part of it, with the lesbian mm, stuff, was not punishable, but the gay stuff was punishable. Talk about equality and the communism and communistic ideas. Well, I'm really interested if the modern communists would really allow that type of Soviet regime.
engaging in espionage. Throughout the Soviet era, being openly gay meant facing prison or even hard labor. Not
Yeah,
only that, gay people were widely considered pedophiles and fascists, and still are in
fascist. Well, the tables have turned.
parts of modern Russia, where homophobia still lingers.
Yeah, it still lingers, and just like in the other countries, but now there is more leftist stuff going in the country. So, yeah, stuff is happening, probably. I don't know if this is good or if this is bad, but the fact is a fact.
Stalin's anti-gay legacy lingered into the mid-90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union. Gay people in prison for sodomy didn't even receive amnesty when the laws that put them there were repealed in 1993.
Yeah. Heavy metal bands were blacklisted from discotheques. Yeah, it was actually true, and there was even a list of the bands that were considered to be bad and the bands of the heavy metal genre that were really blacklisted. And not only from the discotheques, but just overall. I especially remember that such bands as Black Sabbath and UFO were blacklisted. I'm really interested if they are going to show just the whole list.
Facing accusations of religious obscurantism and anti-communism, heavy metal bands
Oh, here we go. Black Sabbath.
such as Black Sabbath, Nazareth, Iron Maiden, and Judas Priest were on a secret blacklist kept by the Soviets and distributed to party officials in 1985.
Yeah.
It wasn't just heavy metal that threatened the establishment, though. Plenty of pop and indie acts made the list, too. Bands like Talking Heads, The Village People, and 10cc were listed in the document, which was written up for the purpose of intensifying control over the activities of discotheques.
Yeah, there was literally a whole list of bands that were blacklisted.
The translated
The approximate list of foreign musical groups and artists whose repertoires contain ideologically harmful compositions. Oh, so that's what it was.
title of the blacklist, by the way, was The Approximate List of Foreign Musical Groups and Artists Whose Repertoires Contain Ideologically Harmful Compositions. It's hard not to be amused by a totalitarian regime feeling threatened by the village people.
Yeah. A state newspaper called for the end of bric-a-brac? I do not know what they mean by that.
It's hard to imagine a capitalist government using its citizens to stop the production of tasteless bric-a-brac. But that's exactly what the Soviets did. The Soviets apparently hated kitsch, at least in the early days. In 1928, the state-run newspaper Komsomolska Pravda
Комсомольская правда. Yeah. Награждена первым орденом. Получение этой почетной награды является торжеством всего. Так, мы, евреи, будем бороться за генеральную линию партии против всех и всяческих. So it just says about the fight with the class enemy.
even launched a campaign called Down with Domestic Trash.
Oh,
Why?
this is-
According to the state-run newspaper, all these dogs, mermaids, figurine devils, and elephants
So that's what it is. Ah, I see.
only help smuggle back mishchanstva.
Мещанство, yeah. Мещанство was one of the parts of the terminology of the USSR, which, let's just say, referred to the imperial Russia, because in the imperial Russia during the empire there was such term as мещанство, and мещанство was so where the people who lived in the cities, the people who were considered to be the elite of the society.
Mishchanstva, for the record, is a virtually untranslatable term meaning
No, it's not. It's just well, it's one of the Sovietisms that now exist in the English language. So preoccupation with everyday.
preoccupation with everyday.
I wouldn't say so. It's the term that literally means the elite of the society, but this particular term refers to the people of the other period. It refers more to the Russian Empire.
I wonder how they'd feel about Funko Pop figures.
Jews were forced to hide matzah in suitcases. Yeah, it was true because of some of the cases which happened in the USSR, and because of the general policy which really didn't like Jewish people that much. I tried to just remember this one particular case which began it all, but I cannot. It was about a Jewish person who, well, who was thought to kill the children for a ritual. Yeah.
Jewish people living in the Soviet Union after World War II were forced to hide matzah in pillowcases inside suitcases and transport it when visiting relatives because baking it inside synagogues was explicitly forbidden. Matzah, for those who don't know, are the flat crackers Jews eat to commemorate Passover. The Soviet secret police would patrol synagogues to enforce the rule, so Jewish families in the USSR had to get secretive themselves. It's odd to think of making crackers as an act of rebellion, but it was. A man named Slav
It was only because of one element of the policy of the USSR, and it was that religious acts were not, let's just say, accepted.
who lived through it all, says it was a point of pride. It was like a sense of secrecy around this, and it was filling, to some degree, with some pride, your heart. You're doing something secretly that the government doesn't want.
And so this is it. They are not going to talk about that particular case and about the overall ideas that were quite aggressive. So staples in Soviet passports corroded.
Yes, the staples that held together Soviet passports were made from an inferior metal that could corrode and get rusty. This may seem like a bug, but it was actually a feature, and for
Oh, this one is also Ukrainian. Wow, they show so much stuff that is Ukrainian and not Russian. It really is interesting. So, what do we have right here? SRSR. It even is written in Ukrainian because in Ukraine, people did not call USSR the same way it was called in Russia. In Russia, it was SSSR. Союз Советский Социалистический Республик, and in Ukraine it was SRSR, and SRSR means Союз Радянських Соціалістичних Республік. It is the same thing. Okay, so it is really just a passport, дані про показчика, час і місце народження, so just the overall information about the person. Oh, so it is in Ukrainian, then it is in Russian, сведения о предъявителе, yeah, and right after that it's French. I don't know French at all, but it seems to be in French. Okay, the third part of it. Probably it is.
secret agents trying to use fake passports, it was a huge deal. Unlike passports in the USSR, American passports used stainless steel staples. So anyone trying to pass their fake Soviet passport off as a real one gave themselves away if they were using the wrong staples. A Russian FSB, or Federal Security Service, official told the Chicago Tribune that hundreds of American agents got caught because they didn't know this. It's always the little things.
Yeah, it really always is the little things, especially such as these one.
So what?
And so this is it. Well, okay, this was quite interesting. There was a lot of information. Not all of the information was actually correct, like 100% correct, but it was quite interesting. And as the general information, it would be quite good for the people who are actually interested in the history of the USSR. So there are many, many more things that need to be covered. So well, it was only one of the parts. I've also got a second video of the channel Weird History, and this one, the second one, is about the culinary ideas and the culinary stuff. So if you are interested, I am going to make another reaction and tell you even more about the stuff that people ate during the existence of the USSR. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for watching the video. Well, I've had a great time. Hope you did.